I'm a 31-year-old woman, and in my family, appearances have always mattered more than anything else. Every gathering was treated like a stage performance, the food plated perfectly, the outfits coordinated, the speeches rehearsed. It wasn't about being together, it was about looking perfect together. My younger sister Brooke loved that. She treated every get-together like an audition for favorite child. If I mentioned a small success at work, she would immediately outdo it. When I got promoted, she just happened to announce her new certification the next day. It was never enough for her to shine. She had to shine brighter than me. Her compliments always carried a hidden edge. If I wore something new, she'd tilt her head and say I actually looked nice in that color, like it was a miracle. My parents never noticed. To them, it was just friendly sister teasing. They told me to be the bigger person, that Brooke didn't mean harm. At a cousin's engagement party, I saw exactly how much she enjoyed stealing the spotlight. I was giving a short toast when Brooke grabbed the microphone halfway through, laughing as she told everyone she was the one who introduced the couple. Everyone laughed with her, and I stepped aside. My words forgotten. That was how it always went. Brooke performing, me disappearing. The pattern became obvious after that. Birthdays, holidays, weddings, all turned into opportunities for Brooke to collect attention. One Christmas, I spent weeks finding an antique pendant for our mother. When she opened it, Brooke gasped loudly and told everyone it was a joint gift from both of us. My parents praised her thoughtfulness, and I just smiled, deciding it wasn't worth a scene. It even bled into my professional life. At my company's holiday mixer, Brooke managed to charm my boss after being introduced. By the end of the night, she was joking about how I always needed help keeping up. It was delivered sweetly, as if she were proud of me, but I saw how quickly people believed it. The final straw came at my father's retirement party. I'd spent weeks helping him prepare a small slideshow of his career. When he stood to speak, Brooke interrupted, announcing her own promotion and thanking him for raising 2 successful daughters. The night shifted instantly from celebrating his 40 years of work to congratulating her. That's when I stopped pretending not to notice. It wasn't about sibling rivalry anymore. It was about her need to control every moment. I realized confronting her would only make me look bitter. She thrived on reactions, so I decided to give her exactly what she wanted: an audience. Our parents' 40th anniversary was coming up, and everyone expected it to be another Brooke-led spectacle. Before she could claim it, I offered to plan it myself. My parents looked thrilled, and Brooke's eyes lit up in that way that told me she'd already decided how to take it over. That was fine. I wanted her too. Quietly, I began working on something different. Along with the dinner and slideshow, I built a family trivia game, a celebration of shared memories. Every question had photos, dates, or records attached. Every story was verifiable. There would be no twisting, no credit theft, no way to rewrite history. When the preparations were done, I double-checked every detail. The questions, the photos, the sequence, all set. Brooke thought she'd be stepping onto another stage, but this time, she'd find herself under the brightest kind of spotlight, the truth. The moment my parents mentioned to Brooke that I was planning the anniversary celebration, I knew what would happen next. She called the very next morning, her voice full of excitement. She said she just had to be part of it, since everyone trusted her with creative things. I told her I'd love her help. There was no hesitation. The more control she thought she had, the easier it would be for her to expose herself. By the end of the call, she had already declared herself co-lead. Within a day, she started sharing her ideas in the family group chat, flower arrangements, themes, and colors that sounded straight out of a hotel lobby. My parents were thrilled. They said the two of us working together would make it the most memorable anniversary yet. I agreed with them, keeping my real plans quiet. Brooke moved fast. She called around and found a banquet hall nearby, bragging about how she got a great discount through connections. Later that week, I ran into the manager, an old work acquaintance, who told me he'd given the discount because of my name on the booking. I didn't bother correcting her version of the story. It fit perfectly into her usual pattern of taking credit where she didn't earn it. A few days later, I saw the digital invitations she designed. At the top in bold letters, it read, "Event organized by Brooke." Beneath it, in smaller print, was assistant planner, Lydia. I saved a screenshot immediately. It wasn't anger that made me do it, it was instinct. Brooke had rewritten history so often that evidence had become my quiet defense. Within hours, relatives started messaging about how amazing Brooke was for stepping up again. I smiled, responded with polite thank yous, and didn't correct a single one. The more the story built around her, the bigger the fall would be when the truth came out. When it came to vendors, Brooke's charm started showing cracks. She told the florist and the caterer that they'd get free promotion instead of full payment. I only found out because the florist called me directly, confused about the arrangement. I paid every invoice quietly from my own account. I wanted the night to go smoothly, even if it meant cleaning up her mess behind the scenes. While she juggled decorations and speeches, I was building the trivia game. Each question was based on verifiable family moments, birthdays, vacations, achievements, the things Brooke loved to rewrite. Every photo, receipt, and date matched perfectly. Some questions were deliberately subtle, like who planned the 2016 church fundraiser. The answer would be backed by a slide showing my name on the official certificate. It wasn't about revenge, it was about evidence. One evening while reviewing the game on my laptop, I confided in my cousin Jenna. She'd seen Brooke's behavior for years and didn't need much explanation. I told her my theory, that Brooke wouldn't know how to handle a situation where facts replaced flattery. Jenna promised to stay quiet and just observe. Brooke, meanwhile, was preparing for her grand performance. Her husband mentioned that she'd been practicing her thank you speech every night, standing in front of the mirror. She kept telling him that this event would finally show everyone how to impress people properly. She didn't realize that was exactly what I was counting on. She even added several of her friends to the guest list, people who'd only heard her side of every story. I approved all of them without question. The more witnesses, the stronger the impact of the truth. For decorations, she picked a gold and cream theme, but I added a few touches of my own. Trivia cards in subtle shades of blue and white, representing truth and memory. She didn't notice. She was too focused on the spotlight. A week before the event, she insisted we remove the trivia portion. She said it might dull the flow of her slideshow. I told her she was probably right and agreed to cut it. In reality, I kept it programmed to autoplay immediately after her presentation. She thought she was getting the last word. She wasn't. The day before the anniversary, I arrived at the hall early to check everything myself. I confirmed every file, printed every card, and made sure each photo was dated correctly. There would be no chance for Brooke to twist anything. Every answer had a record. Every statement had proof. When I finished, I walked through the empty banquet hall. The tables were set, the slideshow equipment tested, the trivia queued up. Everything looked perfect on the surface, just how Brooke liked it. But underneath that polish, every detail pointed toward the truth. That night, she texted our family group that everything was fully handled. She mentioned how grateful she was that I'd let her take the reins. My parents sent a stream of heart emojis, proud of their teamwork. Brooke went to bed believing she'd outdone me again, that she controlled every piece of the night. I went to bed knowing that for once, the stage she built would finally show what had always been hiding in plain sight. The day of the anniversary arrived clear and cool, the kind of evening that looked perfect from the outside. Brooke arrived hours before the event, dressed in a sequined gown that caught every bit of light. She swept through the hall, giving orders to the staff, adjusting flowers, rearranging table settings, and checking the mirrors. Her voice carried across the room as she reminded everyone that she was the one in charge. I let her direct while I quietly checked the lighting, the screens, and the trivia slides hidden in the presentation folder labeled Anniversary Visuals. By late afternoon, the hall was glowing. Gold runners, candles, and polished cutlery reflected the warm light from the chandeliers. Brooke moved from table to table, adding small finishing touches she'd brought from home. Name tags, folded napkins, her signature scented candles. Guests began to arrive soon after, and she was waiting near the entrance, greeting each one like a host at a red carpet event. Her laughter filled the space as relatives complimented her on how beautiful everything looked. I stood near the projector, keeping an eye on the tech setup and pretending to review cue notes. When my parents walked in, the whole room turned toward them. They looked genuinely touched, my mother in her navy dress, my father holding her arm as guests clapped. Brooke clapped the loudest. She quickly ushered them to the front, announcing that she had a few words prepared to start the evening. Without asking, she took the microphone and began. Her speech was long and dramatic, full of exaggerated childhood memories and carefully timed pauses for applause. She told stories about helping plan every family milestone, and several guests nodded along, clearly unaware of the truth. I stayed in the back, managing the audio volume and letting her perform. After her opening act, she gestured toward the screen for the slideshow she'd spent all week bragging about. It started with baby pictures and family trips. She narrated each slide, shaping every story around herself. When a photo of our parents' first home appeared, she claimed she helped renovate it as a teenager. My father's smile faltered slightly. That house had been sold before Brooke even entered high school. A few guests noticed but said nothing. Then came a picture from a local charity event years ago. Brooke described it as a joint project we had organized together. The slide showed me alone, handing out flyers. Someone near the front whispered something to their spouse. The air shifted. When her slideshow ended, applause came out of politeness, more than excitement. She smiled proudly and announced that dinner would be served soon. But as she turned away, the screen flickered and displayed a new title, Family Trivia, 40 Years of Memories. She froze for a split second before forcing a grin. I stepped forward, taking the microphone with an easy smile. I thanked everyone for coming and explained that we'd be playing a short trivia game celebrating family milestones. The first question popped up on the screen. Who organized the 2016 church fundraiser? Brooke's hand shot up immediately, answering with her own name. The slide shifted, revealing a photo of me with a certificate signed by the event committee. A quiet laugh rippled through the audience. The next few questions stayed lighthearted: vacation destinations, favorite meals, and funny pet stories. Brooke relaxed again, answering confidently. Then came, who designed the 2018 holiday invitations? She smirked, claiming she did, until the screen displayed a file name with visible metadata showing, created by, Lydia Marshall. Her posture stiffened. People chuckled again, softly this time, like they weren't sure if it was awkward or funny. I advanced to the next question. Who covered the catering bill for the 2020 Christmas dinner? Brooke leaned into the microphone, making a joke about how family always shares costs. The screen changed to show a scanned transaction from my account. This time the laughter stopped entirely. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the projector. Brooke laughed nervously and tried to move closer to the front. She said something about it being a misunderstanding, but the trivia kept rolling. Who coordinated the surprise for Dad's retirement? The slide showed my calendar notes, receipts, and an email thread addressed to me. There wasn't anything left to say. My cousin Jenna stood near the back watching everything unfold, her expression neutral, but her attention sharp. She didn't need to speak. The truth was doing the talking. My parents exchanged glances, small and quiet, but unmistakable. Brooke's stories were unraveling one by one, not through confrontation, but through evidence. By the final round, she had stopped answering altogether. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, her smile frozen. The guests sat still, shifting in their seats, unsure where to look. I ended the trivia smoothly, thanking everyone for participating and announcing that dinner was ready. As the music started and people began moving toward the buffet, Brooke stayed at her table. Her friends whispered to each other, glancing between her and me. I focused on helping my parents greet their guests. My mother hugged me tightly, murmuring something about how wonderful the trivia had been. Brooke stood up shortly after, claiming she needed to make a call, and disappeared outside. The rest of the night moved on quietly. Conversations softened, laughter returned in bits and pieces, and for once, it wasn't directed at someone's performance. My parents enjoyed their meal surrounded by people genuinely focused on them. By the end of the evening, only a few guests mentioned Brooke's early exit. Most spoke about the trivia, how clever it was, how much they learned about the family, how it brought back memories. I packed up the equipment as the hall emptied, leaving the space spotless. Brooke had spent weeks making sure everyone saw her as the star of the show. By the time the lights went out, she had become the only person in the room no one was looking at anymore. After the trivia ended, Brooke stood frozen near the stage, holding her champagne glass with a shaky smile that fooled no one. Guests clapped softly, but the sound was thin and uneven, like everyone was unsure what they were applauding. She tried to laugh it off, calling it a funny little mix-up, yet no one responded. The room had already shifted, the curtain had lifted, and everyone could see what had been hiding behind it. My parents sat at their table, exchanging the kind of glance they hadn't shared in years, one that said more than words. My father's expression was tight, his eyes flicking between Brooke and the slides that were still visible on the big screen. My mother kept her hands clasped, polite but visibly tense. For the first time, they were connecting the dots between all the misunderstandings Brooke had caused over the years. I stepped away under the pretense of checking the dessert table. It gave everyone space to process, and it left Brooke standing in the spotlight she had always wanted. Only now it was too bright. Guests began whispering in corners, soft, careful tones, piecing together memories. Someone recalled how Brooke had once taken credit for a school fundraiser. Another mentioned her sudden promotion last year that no one could confirm. Each small recollection built into something larger, undeniable. Near the kitchen, Brooke caught up to me. Her steps were quick, sharp against the tile. She accused me of setting her up, her voice low but shaking. She said I'd humiliated her in front of everyone. I told her the trivia wasn't made to expose anyone. It was just the truth. That ended the conversation. Her silence said everything. She returned to the dining area a few minutes later, her face composed again, but her shoulders stiff. She raised her glass and announced that she wanted to make a toast to family unity. The words barely carried. No one lifted their glass. My father broke the silence with a calm remark, "Truth doesn't hurt unless it's hiding something." Brooke's grip on the glass tightened, but she didn't respond. Around her, the air grew awkward. Cousins who used to laugh at her jokes avoided her eyes. Friends shifted in their seats. The same people who once fed her spotlight now sat quietly, uncertain what to say. She took one sip from her glass, set it down, and announced she wasn't feeling well. Her husband stayed seated, staring at his plate as she gathered her purse and walked out. Once she was gone, the atmosphere loosened almost immediately. Conversations picked back up, light, casual, comfortable, in a way they hadn't been all night. My father got up to refill drinks. My mother laughed at a story from one of the guests, and people began to enjoy themselves again. Without Brooke, the room finally felt like a family gathering rather than a performance. As the evening wound down, guests came up one by one to thank me for the trivia game. No one said Brooke's name, but their expressions said they understood more than they had before. When the last guests left, my parents stood by the door, tired but smiling. My mother patted my arm and told me it was the best anniversary they'd ever had. That night, after everything was cleaned up, my phone buzzed with messages. Cousins and family friends sent texts saying it was long overdue, that they'd always wondered about the stories Brooke told, that they were proud of how I handled things calmly. I didn't reply to most of them. The situation didn't need more words. It had already spoken for itself. Later, Brooke's husband called. His voice was hesitant but honest. He said he'd realized something that night, that Brooke had been living inside her own version of reality for years, changing small details until even he stopped questioning them. He didn't sound angry, just tired. He said he hoped she'd see the truth, now that everyone else finally had. By morning, the story of what happened had spread quietly through the family, not as gossip, but as acknowledgement. There were no arguments, no debates, just a shared understanding that something that had been off for years had finally clicked into place. The next week, when I stopped by my parents' house to drop off leftover decorations, the trivia cards were still on the coffee table. My father picked one up and read it aloud with a small laugh. "Simple questions," he said. "Funny how powerful truth can be when you let it speak for itself." I didn't add anything to that. There was no need. Brooke's name didn't come up again that day, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was steady. For the first time, there was no pretending, no performance, and no shadow hanging over the table. The trivia had done exactly what it was meant to do, not to embarrass, not to punish, but to clear the fog that had followed my family for years. For once, everyone could finally see things as they were. And that was enough. The family group chat went quiet after the anniversary night. Messages about random topics still popped up, recipes, photos, travel plans, but whenever Brooke's name appeared, the conversation stopped. No one mentioned her directly. My parents avoided bringing her up too. For weeks it was as if she'd quietly faded from the family, leaving a strange calm behind. Then, one afternoon, my mother called to say they wanted to have a small dinner. Nothing formal, just the four of us. She said they missed normal family time, and thought it might be a good chance to smooth things over. I agreed, but only on the condition that it wouldn't turn into a speech or confrontation. She promised it wouldn't. The dinner was set for a Friday night. I arrived right on time, carrying dessert, and found Brooke already there. She was dressed perfectly, in a cream blouse and gold earrings, her hair styled like she was attending a magazine shoot. She greeted me like we hadn't seen each other in years, overly cheerful and rehearsed. The table was beautifully set, candles lit, music playing softly in the background. My mother was talking about their upcoming trip, and Brooke chimed in with travel advice she'd copied from an online article. It was clear she was trying to keep the conversation light. She poured wine for everyone, complimented my mother's cooking, and laughed loudly at her own jokes. Each laugh landed in silence. Halfway through dinner, when the tension had thinned just enough, Brooke cleared her throat and said she wanted to say something. She started reading from a folded note she'd taken from her purse, a carefully worded apology about misunderstandings and family love. She called the anniversary night a learning experience. Every sentence sounded polished, practiced. I thanked her politely and shifted the conversation to my parents' travel itinerary, asking about hotel reservations. She nodded, but it was clear she expected something more. Instead, I stayed focused on the topic until she gave up trying to steer it back to herself. A few minutes later, she tried humor instead. She called herself the sister who always takes over everything, glancing around for laughter. None came. My father broke the silence gently, saying he just wanted peace now. Brooke smiled too quickly and agreed, though the flush in her cheeks gave her away. After dinner, we started clearing the table. Brooke went to check her phone in the living room while her husband helped me with the dishes. He looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the door before quietly saying that Brooke had been planning something new. She wanted to rebuild her image and prove she was doing good things. Apparently, she'd scheduled a charity brunch for the following weekend, complete with professional photos and sponsored guests. A few days later, I heard from a mutual friend that the brunch invitations had gone out. The theme was giving back and moving forward. I decided not to confront Brooke. Instead, I planned to attend quietly. A friend of mine had been added to the guest list, so she reserved me a seat under her name. The brunch was held at a rented garden venue. Tables were lined with pastel centerpieces and stacks of glossy brochures with Brooke's logo on them. Photographers circled the tables, snapping pictures as she posed with guests. She began the event with a short speech about personal growth and rediscovering purpose, her voice confident, her smile wide. When she passed out her promotional materials, I picked one up. The design was identical to the layout I'd used for a fundraiser project 2 years earlier. The same wording, same photo placements, even the same tagline. She hadn't changed a single thing, except replacing my name with hers. As guests looked through the materials, a few started whispering. One woman opened her phone, searched my old campaign on social media, and pulled up the archived version. She showed it to the person beside her, and the comparison spread around the tables like a quiet wave. Brooke kept smiling, unaware at first. When someone asked her about the campaign's origin, she said she had hired a designer and that any resemblance was just coincidence. But then another guest mentioned that the digital files they'd seen came from her personal email address. Her own watermark was embedded in the file's metadata. The whispers turned into murmurs. The sponsors who had come to discuss partnerships started exchanging glances. Within half an hour, one of them quietly excused themselves, followed by another. Brooke noticed too late. Her photographer lowered the camera, unsure what to capture anymore. When the questions grew sharper, she shifted the blame to a graphic designer mistake, insisting she hadn't meant to copy anyone. But the damage was already done. Screenshots were shared, comparisons made, and her credibility evaporated faster than her composure. By the time the event ended, the sponsors had withdrawn their offers, and the guests were leaving early. Brooke stood near the exit, still smiling for photos that no one was taking. The brunch that was supposed to rebuild her reputation had become another unraveling, this time in front of people outside the family. From across the garden, I watched her gather the remaining brochures, stuffing them into a box with shaking hands. The crowd she had once controlled was gone. The only thing left behind was proof that no matter how many times she tried to rewrite the story, the truth always found its way back into the light. Within days of the failed brunch, the story spread quietly through the same circles Brooke had worked so hard to impress. Relatives who had once shared her posts stopped mentioning her events altogether. Old colleagues and local vendors began to distance themselves politely. No one said anything cruel, they just stopped engaging. The brunch became the kind of thing people whispered about in passing, a soft reminder that Brooke's charm didn't work the way it used to. A week later, one of her marketing clients canceled their contract after screenshots of her copied materials surfaced. Another postponed their campaign indefinitely. The same people who used to praise her creativity started double-checking her submissions and avoiding her calls. The loss of reputation was quiet but absolute. Brooke's version of control, built on charm and credit, no longer held. She began calling relatives one by one. Each conversation had a different version of what had happened. To one, she blamed a freelance designer. To another, she said she'd been sabotaged. To a few, she claimed the story had been exaggerated online. Every explanation contradicted the last. People listened out of politeness, but her stories lost power as quickly as she told them. I didn't answer when she called. I didn't need to. The truth didn't need defending anymore. It was moving on its own. Instead, I focused on work and let the silence grow. One afternoon, my parents showed up at my house without warning. My mother brought a bag of groceries and started unpacking them like it was any other visit. My father sat at the kitchen table, quiet for a long time before speaking. He said they'd finally seen enough to understand. My mother added softly that they had spent years thinking I was too sensitive, that Brooke's behavior was just her personality. They both admitted they'd been wrong. There wasn't an apology, just recognition, and that was enough. A few days later, a long email from Brooke arrived in everyone's inbox. It was addressed to the entire family and all the guests who had attended the brunch. She called the incident a design mix-up and said she took full responsibility for the misunderstanding. It was wordy, polished, and filled with phrases that sounded borrowed from public relations statements. But she made a mistake. Attached to the email was a file she hadn't meant to send, a draft version of my original fundraiser campaign. Her handwritten notes were visible in the margins, along with small edits replacing my name with hers. The timestamps confirmed everything. Within minutes, screenshots circulated through family chats. There was no room left for denial. The next morning, Brooke's husband called my father. He said he couldn't keep defending her. He tried to reason with her privately for months, but she refused to stop spinning new stories. That same evening, my parents called me and said they wanted to have both of us over for dinner. This time, they weren't trying to reconcile us. They wanted to end the cycle entirely. The following Friday, I arrived to find Brooke already seated at the table, a stack of printed documents in front of her. She greeted me with a strained smile and started explaining that everything people believed was a misunderstanding. She flipped through her papers like evidence, but each page only dug her deeper. My father waited until she stopped talking before pulling out a folder of his own. He spread several printed pages across the table, photos from the trivia night, the copied fundraiser materials, bank receipts, and a list of events where she had altered credit or exaggerated her role. He didn't raise his voice or lecture. He simply laid out the facts. The sound of paper sliding across the wood was louder than the words that followed. Brooke's confidence cracked for the first time. Her explanations fell apart mid-sentence. She covered her face, muttering that she only wanted to feel appreciated. No one interrupted. No one argued. The silence stretched until she realized no one was going to comfort her this time. Finally, my father spoke. He told her this couldn't continue, that she needed to take time away from family events until she could show change through actions, not apologies. My mother nodded in agreement. There was no anger in their tone, just exhaustion and finality. Brooke didn't fight back. She gathered her papers, left them on the table, and stood up. The front door closed softly behind her, and the sound seemed to echo through the house. After she left, my parents sat quietly. My father leaned back in his chair and exhaled, saying he wished they'd seen it sooner. My mother started clearing the dishes. No one mentioned Brooke again that night. When I got home later, the house was still. I hung up my coat, set down my bag, and stood for a moment in the quiet. For the first time in years, it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was clean, steady, and full. The performance had finally ended. Months passed quietly after that dinner. Brooke didn't reach out, and no one in the family mentioned her again. The group chat returned to normal. Recipes, updates about my parents' trip. Small things that actually mattered. Her absence became part of the rhythm. When her name did appear, it was only in short updates from my father, like Brooke sent the check for mom's medicine, or she moved into a smaller place. The peace in our family was something new. Holidays were calm. There were no arguments about who handled what. No competition for attention. My parents stopped overcompensating for Brooke's dramatics and began enjoying things as they were. When I hosted dinner one weekend, my father joked that the meals finally ended early because no one's giving a victory speech. It made everyone laugh. The kind of laughter that sounded free. Brooke's husband eventually finalized their separation. My mother mentioned it one evening in a measured tone, saying he'd been the one to file quietly. He'd moved out weeks before the family meeting, and now he'd rented a small apartment closer to his work. Brooke, from what little my mother knew, had taken a position at a boutique agency outside the city. She was working as a junior coordinator, rebuilding from the bottom. There were no posts online, no grand relaunches, just quiet. A few weeks later, a small envelope arrived in my parents' mailbox. My mother handed it to me when I stopped by. Inside was a short note in Brooke's handwriting. It wasn't an apology, it simply said she was focusing on smaller things now and wouldn't be attending family gatherings for a while. There was no explanation beyond that. My mother sighed, folded the note back into the envelope, and set it aside. Time moved on. I got busier at work, managing new clients, taking on larger campaigns. The same week I received a promotion, my parents returned from their trip abroad. Over dinner, my father said something that caught me off guard, that he finally understood what balance felt like. He said it was strange how quiet could be the most peaceful sound a family could have. Brooke stayed distant for months. On birthdays and holidays, she sent generic cards with her signature printed at the bottom, never personalized. My mother always placed them on the mantle without comment. My father never mentioned them. The distance had settled into something stable, not hostile, just final. Then one afternoon, I stopped by a cafe near my office after a client meeting. I ordered a drink, turned to find a seat, and saw her. She was standing a few feet away, in line, holding a small tote bag, dressed plainly in jeans and a beige sweater. Her hair was shorter now, no jewelry, no dramatic makeup. She looked almost like a stranger. For a moment, she didn't notice me. Then her eyes lifted, and our gazes met. There was no tension, no confrontation, just a small, tired nod from her, not asking for anything, not defending herself. I nodded back, gave a faint smile, and stepped aside for her to order. That was it. No words, no scenes, just acknowledgement. Later that evening, I found myself looking through the storage boxes in my hallway closet. One of them contained the leftover decorations from the anniversary party, the trivia cards, the printed family photos, the slideshow USB drive. I picked up one of the trivia cards and read the first question. Who planned the 2016 church fundraiser? The ink had faded slightly, but the answer was still there in black letters. I stacked the cards neatly back into the box and sealed it shut. At the next family dinner, my father mentioned that Brooke had called to check on their health. He said the conversation was short but polite. My mother nodded, saying it was probably the start of her keeping distance respectfully. They didn't discuss her any further. The evening went on easily, filled with stories about travel and food, the way gatherings used to be before everything became a performance. Spring came and went. Life continued. Brooke's absence didn't hang over us like it used to. It had simply become space that allowed everyone to breathe, to stop competing, to exist without walking on eggshells. One evening, while helping my parents clean out their attic, I came across a photo album tucked in a corner. Inside were old pictures of our childhood, birthdays, vacations, graduations. In every photo, Brooke was smiling brightly, always at the center. I didn't linger long. I placed the album back on the shelf and dusted off my hands. Some stories didn't need revisiting, they just needed to rest. By the time autumn arrived, my parents had adjusted completely. They stopped hoping Brooke would change and started appreciating what they had. When relatives visited, they talked about new things, not who did what, not who deserved attention, just life. Months later, while hosting a small family barbecue, I got a message from an unknown number. It was from Brooke. It said, "I'm doing okay. I hope everyone is too." I showed it to my parents, and my mother simply said, "That's good," before returning to the grill. There was no discussion afterward. As the night went on, laughter filled the backyard. My father raised a glass, toasting to peaceful nights. The lights from the patio glowed softly across the garden, and I realized how long it had been since any gathering had ended with tension. Brooke didn't come back into our lives after that. She didn't need to. Everyone had finally found their place, her included. The balance that had taken years of quiet unraveling to build now held steady. There were no speeches, no competitions, no forced apologies, just family, finally existing without comparison. And in that calm, it was clear. The real victory had never been proving who was right. It was ending the game altogether.